All right, we'll give it. We will let the attendees get in. Hello, everybody. Welcome to yet another Nucleus vulnerability management webinar. Everybody's favorite topics. The very, very fun vulnerability management space. Everybody loves it. Let's see. Give it another couple minutes. Now, Peter, I would be remiss to not do the Nucleus tradition, which is when we bring a guest on, to ask if you have any cybersecurity jokes in the 2 minutes while we wait for everybody to trickle in.
No, I love puns, but puns can only be said when somebody else has really triggered one. So
That's
I'm
that's
I'm at a loss for a cybersecurity joke, but I love a good dad joke and I love a good pun. So
that's right. We'll sneak one in. We'll make it a goal to sneak one in today. And let's see, with that, we'll just get everything situated, and then we should get ready to go. Great. I think that's calling it good. We've got a raised hand. All right, we are ready to go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another webinar with Nucleus Security. Today, we are here to talk about vulnerability management, as we always are going to do. We've got a really special guest today to talk about single pane of glass. Since we're not seeing videos. Oh, let's see if might have to reshare. Folks in the chat, can you still see no video? Or are you good? We're good. All right. So welcome everybody to another Nucleus Security webinar. We're going to be talking about what a single pane of glass is in relation to vulnerability management. If you read the abstract for this, you'll know that we have a, call it like a very checkered past when it comes to single pane of glass and what that means. And as a tech industry, it really gets very competing types of feelings from the industry, right? So first and foremost, we get the tech folks that always start to roll their eyes when you hear single pane of glass, because they're like, well, it's not accurate, right? What is a single pane of glass? And then you've got the executive folks and management that's really trying to get visibility and accountability across an organization. So they want single panes of glass, but I think there is some confusion and some mismatch and a misalignment of what that means. And so we're here to talk today about that and really what a single pane of glass can do for you. What it can't do for you is equally as important. And who we've brought with us today is a very special guest. His name is Peter Wolski. He works at MYOB. He is the CISO over there. And he has tons of experience implementing single panes of glass. And Peter, for those that don't know you, would you mind giving a quick little intro on your background, if you don't mind?
thanks, Scott, and thanks for having me. My name is Peter. I have the privilege of leading the reliability and security functions at MYOB. MYOB is a SaaS platform for small businesses in Australia and New Zealand. And we have been on a journey to address vulnerabilities over the past couple of years with the support of many tools, uplifting our processes, changing our culture, and one of those tools was Nucleus. I've been in the security industry 20 years now, in various roles, everything from architecture to governance to security testing. I've done it all for my sins. And vulnerabilities are the one thing that security teams can't seem to solve. Everything from people writing the code to people deploying systems to people managing and maintaining systems. So I think that's one of the things that we really, really need to continue to focus on to be successful.
Great, thanks. And yeah, I think that it's one of those things that, everybody loves to talk about, but there hasn't been a ton of progress over the last 15, 20 years. And we're going to dig into why we think that is. But with that, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen again just so we can, we did the little intros. For those that you don't know me, I'm one of the co-founders of Nucleus. Obviously, we do vulnerability aggregation and management. So everything post-scan, all of the management of workflows and aggregated data, those types of workflows. But what we're going to talk about today is we are going to answer a few very specific questions, and we're going to have this be very discussion-based. We'd love for it to be very interactive. The last time we did one of these webinars, it turned it really into an Ask Me Anything with our guests. And so we love interaction from the audience, and we'll do our best to get to your questions. So pop it in the chat or the Q&A within Zoom, or if you're watching on LinkedIn, just answer your question or drop your question in the chat there. But let's go ahead and get started. So Peter, we're going to start off with a question for you. What actually does a single pane of glass mean? And what does it mean in the context of vulnerability management specifically?
Yeah, so I'm probably not one to get too hung up on definitions. And Scott, we were just talking as we were warming up. One of the first single panes of glass I came across was SSO deployments, so single sign-on deployments, and never have I seen a single sign-on deployment that actually is single sign-on, unless you're starting greenfields and you have no other systems. And I haven't had the opportunity or luck to really be in one of those companies. So there's always legacy to deal with. So for me, reducing context switching, reducing the amount of the amount of things people have to look at, and the value you're going to get from the tool is the thing that I'd be concentrating rather than the term single. Yeah, so that for me is what I'm trying to do, is reduce the amount of context I have, give me the ability to focus on something.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I will say in my experience, when it comes to single panes of glass, everybody they love the phrase, right? And I think it's, oftentimes marketing gets in the way and starts to cause different things to be causes certain topics to really be latched onto, right? I think about things like zero trust as well, right? In the early days of zero trust, it's like, what does that actually mean? I think single pane of glass is one of those terms that really has been shifted, and kind of you can make it adapt to whatever you want. And so I feel like there's a lot of frustration with how we name things and some of the analyst firms for coming up with these phrases, because we do get hung up on the terminology single pane of glass. And so why do you think it is that security professionals get hung up on the term single pane of glass, and what should we do to address that in your mind? Like, is that something that we should just say, hey, ignore the term single? Like, what's your thought process on that?
I think broadly, I don't know. I'm a optimistic pragmatist, but I think many security people are pessimists. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in this industry. But I'm happy to ignore it. Like I understand that the single bit is the dream, is the unicorn, and it's a journey to get there. I don't. Yeah, I gave up a long time ago worrying about whether it should be called cybersecurity or information security, or I don't know how many other wars there've been around terminology and terms in our field. Yeah, I just need the tool or the thing to do what I need it to do, and I'm happy.
It's a great segue. So in that scenario, what does a tool that professes to provide a single pane of glass, specifically in vulnerability management, what does it have to provide to you in order for you to feel like it's a successful implementation of, man, I'm gonna get tired of saying single pane of glass today.
Yeah, so for me in vulnerability management, I really needed a few things. And we're starting to see more and more. I think a couple of minutes ago you said we haven't seen much movement in the last 15 years, but I think we've seen a whole lot of movement in the last 18 months, 2 years, and it's been fantastic. Just last week, the NCSC released new guidance, new version of CVSS, EPSS. I am not going to be able to name all those or define all those acronyms. But so we're getting new acronyms, which is great. But those acronyms are actually helping us solve this problem. So that's number one. Number two, to be able to ingest many different identification sources. I think the other kind of hot topic at the moment is security platforms. Most organizations don't have one security platform; they have many tools. So being able to ingest those and be multi-vendor, I think, is really important. To ingest the context about the organization. So like we use Backstage for that context to really map out our systems and understand the criticality of those systems and their context, to allow us to enrich our vulnerability data to be able to make better prioritization decisions. And so for me, they're the key things when I was looking at a tool and the team was looking at a tool to help us with this problem.
Okay, great. You said something really interesting there, which I want to take a quick side detour down, which is you talked about a single security platform. And I think this is a really topical question or topical comment, because I don't know if you've been paying attention to what's been going on with Palo Alto in the last few weeks. But for those that are not familiar, Palo Alto stock dropped by 25% in like a couple days due to a bad earnings call, and then the CEO came out and talked about how their platform, a security platform strategy, is working and that it's created tons of value for tons of customers. And I'm not going to ask whether or not that is true. We're not here to opine on the stock market. What I am interested in, Peter, is your opinion of when we think about a security platform and what the kind of top level, high level vision of what that could be. I mean, obviously, the CEO of Palo has one idea there, but where do you land on that spectrum? Like, do you feel like it's a best of breed type of solution is in the future? Do you think that it's consolidation and standardization? And if so, how much? I'm curious.
I'll put my architect hat on and say it depends.
Love it.
Security is a series of trade-offs, and depending on the context of your organization and the problems you're facing, you might lean towards best of breed. If it's something you really need to solve, and if it's less of a risk and less of an issue for you, you might make some trade-offs for some of those benefits, like context switching, like not having to go to two different tools, having engineers and analysts understand more than one tool. So you make those trade-offs, even if the capability of a platform might be less in some places. I don't think there's a single answer for that. I don't think a platform will ever be the kind of silver bullet that solves everything. It won't be best of breed enough across enough technology and enough problems. We continue to innovate and come up with new things, which is amazing. And I wouldn't want that to stop. I don't know. The last platform we had was a big yellow company that no longer exists. So I think, it's aspirational, but I don't think it's necessary for me.
Gotcha. We'll play the guessing game at home. For those of you that wanna play along, we might have a bingo card that comes out after this. We may or may not have a lot of folks that have been part of that organization here. But anyway, so as far as I think that's an interesting point, right? And it's one of those ones where I think it really highlights the need for more engagement across tech partnerships within the industry, and I feel like I've been seeing a lot more of that in the last couple of years. But I feel like when you think about open system versus closed system, a lot like I feel like I don't know your impression of this, Peter, but it feels like every single vendor wants to be a single pane of glass, or they want to be a platform, and so I don't know if that's necessarily a possibility. It's not possible for everybody to be a platform, because if they're all platforms, then nobody's a platform. So I don't know if you have any thoughts there, but that's something that I'm seeing as a pattern. And I'm curious if you, on the non-vendor side, are seeing something similar.
It's that kind of merry-go-round. There's consolidation, and then they get too big and not able to deliver on their promises and break up again. And innovators come through and solve problems differently. And one of them gets really good and gets big enough to start buying other innovators, and then they grow too big, and we'll be having this discussion in 20 years.
Great. Yeah. No, we definitely will.
Is that pessimistic?
Job security, man. Job security. We'll be here with the white hair and the beards to talk about the same topic. We'll do a revisit. Retrospective. I don't know. We'll come up with some term for it. So specifically now, to kind of go back to the vulnerability management single pane of glass topic, which is really what we're here to chat about today. I think an important question is, we talked a little bit about what a single pane of glass can do for you. What do you feel like are items that are out of scope? I think it's important to set expectations. Like what types of expectations should customers or prospects or any organization not have when it comes to building an aggregated vulnerability data warehouse?
So yeah, so for me, like I don't know, one of the things that we really talked about was an asset mapping, and that was one to drive ownership, and especially when you're ingesting data into a platform like Nucleus from many tools. assigning that ownership, and tools from, like from writing one line of code all the way through to EC2 instances or a server sitting somewhere. And that for me, the custodianship drives accountability. So I need to be able to link that to people, but I also don't need it to be perfect. And that was one of the things that we really, I think, struggled with at the beginning. And people want a perfect asset database. Everybody wants this unicorn, and I haven't seen a asset database or a configuration management database, if you're an ITIL person, ever that was up to date and perfect and functioning properly. But I don't think that should let you stop trying to do it. If I can find one owner, I can find one person to go fix a set of vulnerabilities and manage and maintain their platform properly. So I think that for me was the biggest thing, is that accountability and custodianship, which we've really been driving, not just from a security perspective, but from a kind of system health perspective at MIOB. And it's been really good to see.
Yeah, so I think that brings up a good question, right? Something I hear about a lot from many organizations that we work with is we don't have a great coverage on our CMDB. We don't know all of the owners. We don't have 100% coverage. So we want to solve asset management and asset inventory before we tackle this problem. How does that make you feel? I see you shaking your head because obviously I feel like that's kind of the negative way to look at it. But on the flip side, it's you don't want to stop all progress just because you don't have full 100% coverage. It sounds like you're in that same boat as well.
Yeah, just start. Like for me, it was just start, and you will fill the gaps. And so one of our OKRs and the metrics of success was getting ownership in Nucleus up over 90%. There'll always be new systems that spin up that maybe people didn't tag properly, or I don't know, something. There's always something, right? So like 100% was never the target, but we were well below 90 when we started. So awesome work by the team. We've recently got above 90%. So like I can, if a new vulnerability comes along, I'm confident I can go find somebody's desk to stand over and say, "What are you doing?"
Well, all I know is that when I just heard you say 90%, I was very very excited. I feel like there's tons of people in the chat that would be very ecstatic to have 90% coverage on their assets. That's a phenomenal win. How did you go about doing that? Right? I mean, obviously you had some amount of coverage. Let's say you started at 60%. What was the approach to start kind of knocking down asset coverage? And is it in your CMDB now, or how do you manage that?
So yeah, it's in Backstage is the kind of source of truth. There's a little bit of manual linking to things, but yeah, the last kind of 10%, we just started assigning ownership based on best efforts, and people are quickly now. I think we left that last because we already had that culture of, I have vulnerabilities, I need to fix them. I'm looking at the reports that are coming out of Nucleus. So when we just started, and not quite randomly, but randomly probably would have worked too, based on the evidence. So if we looked at, I don't know, just things like who touched the code last, who was the engineering manager of that person, great, you now own it. Oh no, I didn't. That person's moved teams, but it is this person, and we quickly got to find out who the owners were and really work through them. We've also been working through that custodianship. Systems have to be tagged in AWS with a system tag from Backstage, which really improved that. And that people are using Backstage and that system tag to tag their systems, and their components are tagged with the same tag. So like that then becomes very pervasive.
Yeah, I've seen something similar in especially larger and more complex organizations. You really have to do a lot of the ownership tagging or ownership attribution at the source. You kind of have to democratize it in a way. And so where we've seen when people talk about shift left, sometimes I sort of laugh and chuckle, and I'm like, okay, well, what do you mean by shift left? But this is one of those areas, an asset ownership, I feel is one of those really, really important ones, number one, but also very possible to shift that all the way to the source, right? Because somebody somewhere is touching the code to, basically push that asset into production somewhere. And so you can trace that And if you build that in as part of their processes, then it becomes really a really solid way to do it. Like I think about an example of one customer who uses Prisma Cloud, compute, what used to be called Twistlock. And I'm always gonna do shout outs to all the old Twistlock folks because I've known them for years, and always gotta do the shout out. But like one of the things that they do is they have this concept where you can basically push these things called collections and tags directly when you push code, right? So like you're using Azure DevOps or Bitbucket or whatever, like literally as part of your PR, it will tag the owner, like kind of as like who pushed the code, those kinds of things. And then you can just inherit that information in all your downstream systems, not just Nucleus, but you can push that into your CMDB if you use it that way. And so I'm very passionate about taking asset inventory and asset management and pushing that as far left as we can so that you can benefit throughout the whole life cycle of a vulnerability. But anyway,
Exactly.
that's my soapbox.
That's awesome. And like our that kind of tagging of the last person that touched the code, I think that was our last resort. I probably wouldn't start there.
Yeah.
But we already had all the behaviors that, like, even when it suddenly came up and it was wrong, people reacted positively, not negatively, which is also the cultural change in the organization has been amazing.
Yeah, cultural change is the hardest part. That's the one
Yep.
that engineers are a fun bunch to work with. I love working with engineers, but we all you have to interact a special way, right? You got to know your tech, oftentimes. But I would like to take a moment. We've gotten a lot of questions in the chat, and I'd like to take a couple pose a couple questions to you to make you put you on the spot here with the folks out there. The first question was, um, what is the best way to sell your top management to convince them to acquire a solution like a Nucleus? So if you were going to go and say, hey, I need to get executive buy-in, what would you say to your executives in order to convince them that they need aggregated visibility or a single pane of glass type solution?
Yep. So I think broadly we knew we had a vulnerability management problem. We had many tools and different speeds at which we were mitigating the vulnerabilities in those tools. But I think the selling point was once it was on, and once we got visibility of just how many issues in one place. And yes, I could do that in a dashboard manually myself and show them, and did. But I think it was very much once we saw how much, and then over the initial months how much we could then start to bring down some of the low hanging fruit, some of the easy things to fix, not even the hard things to fix, like turning stuff off really changed numbers. It's amazing. Who would have thought turning things off works? That's when we started really seeing the value, and not just at the executive level, my peers in the tech leadership team, and those kind of what we call technical system owners, or the custodians of systems, started getting much more visibility, and then started asking for more and more to help them do their jobs.
Yeah, no, that's great. Was there anything in particular from a visibility perspective or a driving of change perspective, like where was your executive team more interested in you saying, "Hey, we know this is what we have, and we think we can decrease by this amount"? Was it a kind of more aspirational? What was your approach there? Was there a particular thing that really resonated?
I think we've had in the last a little while in Australia an uptick in security incidents for larger companies. So I think that really got their focus. And some of those were vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. So we did start getting some questions back. How would you deal with it, Peter? And one of them was, well, we got to make sure we have an effective vulnerability management program.
Yeah, that's great. A fun fact for everybody out there, or fun trivia. Did you all know that the number one source of initial attack vectors into an organization now is no longer phishing assessments and is now vulnerability exploitation? So anyway, fun fact. We can thank our friends at Mandiant for some of that, as well as some others for that. So you had a lot of data on your side, I would say, Peter, in that scenario. Another question that we got was, specifically around Nucleus. I try to keep these webinars more like educational than just purely Nucleus. But we got a couple that were similar to this. So Peter, the question was, what almost kept you from buying a tool like Nucleus Security? And then what made you confident enough to give Nucleus a try amongst all the different vendors?
I don't think anything kept me from it. I think it was the right thing to do. Like it was, yeah. Like I don't think there was anything holding us back. I broadly saw the value of a tool like this. We did a bake-off across a number of tools. We had our inbuilt tool that wasn't effective and took a lot of engineering to maintain, and we would need to put a lot of time into onboarding all the sources that we wanted it to. So it was very limited in that sense. So yeah, that's probably there wasn't any holdback, and yeah, a bake-off was the way we looked at it. We the normal stuff. We wrote some requirements, looked at a couple of tools, and we thought Nucleus was the best.
I didn't pay him to say that, everybody. I didn't. Checks in the mail. Checks in the mail. And it's an expensive check to mail too, because he's in Australia. So that's there's going to be all the inspection and import taxes and everything. I will say, by the way, everybody, say a big thank you to Peter, because it is 6 o'clock in the morning for him as well. Thank you for coming in so early just to talk to everybody about your experience. Now, one other question that we get a lot is what was to you? You mentioned requirements, and you mentioned you wrote kind of like this general list of what you wanted. What would you consider kind of the most critical components of a single pane of glass when it relates to vulnerability management? Like kind of what's just jives with you?
I think being able to ingest lots of sources. And so, like, we develop software, so I need everything from the vulnerabilities in lines of code to containers and EC2 instances. We still have some servers, to then AWS and cloud configurations. I need that full stack because there could be a vulnerability anywhere in that full stack, from a buffer overflow SQL injection in your SaaS tool of choice, all the way through to open S3 buckets or something else at the complete other end of configuring an AWS account. And that also then gives us that full spectrum of visibility of how confident am I with a system that uses all those components, and how many vulnerabilities does it have, and which ones should we fix first?
That all makes sense. It's always fascinating to have these conversations, right? Because especially at Nucleus, we're building new features, we're building like what we consider cool, cutting edge stuff, and then when we talk to folks, it's always like, yeah, well, integrations, all the data in one spot, being able to build processes and policies on top of that, and trust that it's all correct. So I always have to ask, but it's always, sometimes I'm like, can't you just say something like, we want to be on the cutting edge of like getting rid of scanning tools in the future or something, I'm that's how we didn't coordinate, everybody.
like broadly, I like, well, Nucleus is for me a vulnerability management platform, and I've got vulnerability identification tools. Yes, I might be able to get rid of some of them, but I don't think it will be with Nucleus. It will be with consolidating some of those that might say they're a vulnerability identification platform, and they can scan everything for me.
100%. I had to poke a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So like for me, that's the difference. And like there's other things that I love. So we were talking and looking at EPSS before we did the bake off, and that was, I think, some of those conversations around how better can we prioritize around is a vulnerability actually being exploited. And if it is, you should probably look at it much more than a vulnerability that has never been exploited, even if they're the same CVSS score. And when you have hundreds of vulnerabilities and you have engineers that are busy and want to get on with writing code, giving them that priority, I think, is really important. And tools like Nucleus give you that extra data, whether it's threat intelligence data, whether it's EPSS scores, whatever it may be, and really enriches the context of prioritization for security people, but developers as well.
Brings up a good point, right? So we talked a little bit before this started around, where the future of how these single panes of glasses for vulnerability management can really take off and go to the next level. And you mentioned different types of data, right? You mentioned vulnerability identification. You talked about EPSS and CVSS. You talked about some threat intel stuff, exploitation information, and asset info. What would you like to see get added into that data sets, and what would the impact of that be in your mind, right? So the example I always give is, hey, today we can say we have a CVSS version 7 and above, and that's X number of vulnerabilities in our environment. But if you just put the filter of like, hey, what's public facing, now you can whittle that down. So what are the most critical components of information to look at when you're dealing with prioritization in your mind?
So for me, your internal context. So things that are, externally facing in your attack path, and the criticality of your systems are the two key internal contexts that we use. And the attack path one is weighted much higher in our mind than the criticality of the system. A non-critical system with a really open attack path, for me, is more dangerous than a critical system that's more closed off, because that becomes a step. I don't know. I read a really good blog post, Attackers Think in Graphs, and the quote that always resonated with me: attackers think in graphs, defenders think in lists. So that kind of, A, what's your surface, and B, what are the steps to other bits of your network, other parts of your network, I think is the most critical. And then the second one, things like EPSS and threat intel of things that are being actively exploited. So Kev's another one. Kevin's a popular name here, so but I love Kev. But for me, that governments are now starting to lean in and provide us these resources and information where they haven't in the past, and they've been very closed, I think is amazing, and allows, tools like Kev. I don't even need Nucleus to go address the really important things. It's really obvious, really blunt. Anybody from a very small business to a large business can focus on those things. So I think that's also amazing, and part of that change that I mentioned over the last 2 years.
Yeah, I do have some questions about that, but before I get into it, whenever people talk about the KEV or like government regulation and those types of things, I just imagine sitting at the DMV, and there's somebody with a big stamp, and I'm here bringing them, like, there's vulnerabilities and they've got a big failure stamp on it, and so I always just laugh. It's always very like broad and sweeping, and it's like you fail or you don't fail. There's no real nuance and in between. So it always makes me laugh. Like, one of the questions that I have for you, Sissa, if you're on the phone, is we'd love to know, like, last time you saw exploitation, or is it like upcoming exploitation? We'd love any additional information you could provide to the Kev, because we all love it and we would love it to get better. As you can see, it's starting to get adopted pretty widely all the way across the world. So anyway, sorry, side note. We did a breaking of the fourth wall there. So as far as we talked a little bit about, some of the benefits and things that it should do, I would like you to give some of your experience around what some of the challenges that you faced when it came to actually implementing a tool like Nucleus. Some that could be specific to us, could be specific to just, less specific to us, but what types of things should people expect when they're trying to implement a new system like this? Because it really ultimately is a big transformational project. It's a lot of change of culture, so you have to a lot of moving pieces. So what went wrong for you, and what lessons can we learn from that?
There was a really good question from Joel in the chat. Can you drive cultural change through a pane? And I'd say yes and no. The pane by itself will not drive cultural change. It is the team, the communications, the processes you build around it, the enablement that you do around that pane, and we spent a lot of time and effort in doing so. So, like, I have two teams broadly that helped roll this out. One was our security engineering team that helped integrate the tool into all of our tools and make sure it was working. Worked through dashboards and other things. They suddenly became data scientists as well, which was fun. So that side's important, and yes, then you have a functioning tool. And funnily enough, developers want functioning tools. They get very frustrated when they want to do something and they can't do it. So that was one of the keys that we had to get through, and they had requirements, and work closely with your partner, or work closely with your developers to solve that problem. And secondly, we have a product security team, which work very closely with our engineering teams. They're somewhere between really good engineers to solve problems, evangelists, consultants, architects, and they really helped change that culture. Like they're the ones that had those regular meetings with the system owners, with our senior leaders. They're the ones that walk them through the dashboards. They're the ones that walk them through the processes around triage and making sure that was really effective. All of those things. And for me, I don't know, I've been team topologies, which is an awesome book, has been a hot topic in our company. And they're very much that kind of enablement team to drive that adoption of the security platform at MYOB by our engineering team. So I think that was the big one. And so yes, the Pane of Glass helped show teams where their problems were much more easily all in one place, which ones they could work on, what they should be prioritizing. But it was the enablement of using that tool in an easy manner that actually made the difference.
Gotcha. So the way that so just to clarify specifically, so did you had a separate team of, product security folks, and then they would effectively like embed in some way with the different development teams and engineering teams, and and then it was that consistency of continuing to raise the data, saying, hey, the data is here. Here's how you use it. Oh, by the way, this is what we're seeing. Here's what we would do. Here's some guidance. And you felt like that really started to be the main driver of the change for you guys. Is that
100%, 100%.
and would you, I mean, is that like I've seen that happen a few times in different organizations. That definitely seems to be the best way to do it, especially in kind of a more DevOpsy type of organization. Big IT teams maybe a little different, but is there any other approach that you had explored from an org structure perspective that you decided not to pursue? Like, are there other options that some folks could use to potentially get some culture change to happen?
I can tell you methods they shouldn't use, and that's having executives set mandates. And we actually, like, we had support from the executive, we had support from our CTO, but it was actually softly, right? There was, and it was a long transition. Like we went, I don't know, we're a good 18 months to 2 years into our journey. So we celebrated we got to 90%, but it didn't happen overnight. That was a long journey, and it was probably the fifth thing that we ticked off to make sure other things were working before we got there. So yeah, those edicts and mandates don't work, because especially in companies with a strong engineering and developer focus, developers will just go create the tool that they want and use a different set of tools. And I've seen that in some places where you have the mandated security set of tools and teams going and building their own set that works for them. And I think listening to our developers, making sure that the tools work for them, is very much key. That for you, they're our customers, right? So for me, success is people using the tools that we provide to people. I haven't quite got to net promoter scores for our tools, but with that's stuff that we should be using. If people aren't happy using the services and capabilities that that security provides to them, then we're going to fail.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of that in the space. A lot of the kind of shadow, they call it shadow IT, right? But it exists for a reason, and
Yeah.
generally that's from misalignment between security and the goals of the org. So that's always fun. Turns out a lot of security is actually just coordination with the rest of the business to make sure that you're in alignment with what the business needs. So crazy, right? Funny how that works. So okay, so you're much more of a carrot not stick type of approach, is what it sounds like.
Oh,
And
there was a bit of sticking. Don't worry. There was a bit of sticking. Like carrot is this is the way I want you to go. And I'd probably say more hurting than sticking of channeling people down the right goat track that you want them to go down. Yeah. So, but like, there is lots of encouragement. There is lots of I think transparency as well, and Nucleus allowed us to do that. I could break it down by team, by system owner, by product set, by line of business. I had all that data in front of me to be able to share with people. Now, like Mark just asked where the budget come from. So for the security tools, was very much out of the security budget. For rectification and remediation, came out of the tech budget, and where we spent less time doing product stuff, but we had a story to be able to tell about why it was important, and why we had to make those decisions and spend more time on maintenance and system health rather than the next set of product features.
it's always a tough battle. Also, as a software.
But for me, it was a lot easier, right? Like with this, it was a lot easier for myself and the CTO to go tell that story to the other executives and our board that this was important, and for a period of time we needed to buy down some of that debt that we'd incurred.
Gotcha. And do you feel like when it came to what you prioritized work on, did you go with a, hey, let's fix the maximum number of items as quickly as possible, or was it much more based on, like, people call it risk based, but I'll just call it like a much more precise, like, let's go hunting for the top most risky items in our business and then work down that list? Or did you go more of the, hey, we could upgrade this one package and fix X number of vulnerabilities? Like, what was your approach at the executive level that you bought in on? When you said you bought down some of this tech debt and stuff. So what was the approach there?
Both. So the process, we wanted people to concentrate on the riskiest, but some areas, 33-year-old company, we have some areas of legacy. We did just go take time, and we had what we called the security sprints. So some teams went and spent a whole sprint buying down as much as they could. And that worked really well. We could celebrate some really big wins, but B, we by doing those security sprints, we gave the space to developers and engineering managers and delivery managers to go concentrate on security for a large portion. They didn't just fix vulnerabilities in those 2 weeks, but yeah, it was a here's space, here's some focus, and support from the executive to go do that, and I think that helped as well.
I think that's a good segue into one of the questions we got earlier today, which was from Robert in the chat, which was, with the growing state of vulnerabilities today, what challenges have you or your team identified, and what measurements have you taken thus far that have been beneficial to success? So the way I read that is more like what are the specific items? It's kind of tangential to what you were just talking about, where you really felt like had an asymmetric successful outcome. Like, what are those activities that you felt like really drove success rapidly at MYOB?
Yeah, I think, well, one thing every company I've been in is they're consistently inconsistent. So teams have different problems, but we could identify those much easier. Things from an asymmetric point of view, we continue to try to drive people to commoditized platforms, whether that's Kubernetes or AWS. And the less Snowflake you have and the more people on a platform, I just need to change the platform once, and you get benefit from everybody using the platform, which is one of the reasons why we use the cloud and SaaS services, but one of the reasons why we also build platforms ourselves, and we get that kind of really quick benefit without having to go into individual accounts or individual bits of code, or fixing 10 different types of EC2 servers, whatever it may be. The more standardization you get, the better it is. So I think that's, like, through the visibility we've got, I think that's reinforcing that. I don't think anybody argued against it, but it is reinforcing it and making it visible and allowing us to identify places where maybe people aren't on the platform because of the types of vulnerabilities they have, and we can encourage them to move to the platform rather than try to fix their vulnerabilities.
Gotcha. No, that'll make sense. There's some very similar programs going on in the government and whatnot, but to sort of pivot a little bit into some of the types of government regulations that are coming out. So like I think of the Essential Eight out there in Australia.
Yep.
How has that impacted your thinking about cybersecurity in general and your job in general? And then also, specifically vulnerability management. I'd be curious to know how that's adjusted your thinking, because it is relatively recent, right? It's only about 12 months or so old, I think, since it was first published.
Yeah, well, I don't know. They had the not Essential 4. They had something else before the Essential 8. They had 4, so they doubled it for quite some time, at least 10 years. I don't know. I think it's the common that for me, the thing that comes to mind is common sense is not so common, which is why we have to publish these things. I think the biggest benefit is a whole lot of people that maybe didn't think of it that way are now thinking about it. But it's also how you go implement it. Like frameworks are only as good as they're used. They give you direction, but I try not to, and almost rail against trying to go, we're adopting X framework, and then because you fall into that trap of we have to implement everything and understand everything. And really, for me, business context and why you're doing something is as important as what you're doing.
Absolutely. No, it's great. It's one of those things. That was a very nuanced answer, and I appreciate it because I always ask broad questions, and then I like when the answers are actually nuanced, because turns out nuance in all of this. Yeah. So the other thing that I know that I'd like to talk about today a little bit is, so going down the path of a single pane of glass for vulnerability management. We talked before this about, you were before adopting this type of project, you were talking about how do we reduce the number of panes of glass in our organization. What is that? What is that kind of core list of panes of glass that you would view as kind of critical to a high functioning cybersecurity organization?
Oh, wow, I hadn't actually thought of that question. SIEM and alerting and monitoring. I think if you don't understand what's going on in your environment on a day-to-day basis, then you're very likely to fail. I'd like to say one day we solve vulnerabilities and we won't need tools like Nucleus.
I'd love
But
to say that too. I'd love to say that too.
I'm pessimistic about that mission. So I think understanding your vulnerabilities, especially like for me, the more complex your system, the more you need a system like Nucleus. Is my supposition, but I could be wrong. What else? I don't know. Governance, like a risk dashboard. I'd like to be able to see, both of those two other dashboards would feed into the what is my actual risk profile, and are we going well? Like for me, like I hate the let's risk accept a single vulnerability, because a single vulnerability is only a part of a risk to a system. So I don't think you can risk accept a single vulnerability without understanding the context of the system. So for me, that real understanding of the context and from a for me, it's a product thing of the thing that we sell to our customers, but also those are the things that provide benefit to our customers, and they trust us through those products with their data and running their business and all of those things. So I think that's really, really important.
No, I think that's great. And one piece associated with this is, as part of as a vendor yourselves, and to your end customers, how do you think about that in the context of supply chain security, right? Because you're obviously part of a chain, we're part of a chain, we're all part of a big chain. So when you're thinking about giving your customers confidence in your vulnerability management and all of your cybersecurity processes in general, Where does a single pane of glass fit into that, if at all? And what's your approach to giving your customers confidence in your security practices?
So for us at MIB, we're audited independently. We you know, we have a vulnerability uh, uh, notification.
Looks like one of us is cutting out. Looks like we may have lost Peter. Either that or we've lost myself. I don't know. All right, cool. Time to monologue. Let's do it, everybody. Woo! Yeah, while we're waiting for Peter to come back, I was very disappointed. I thought it was going to be a great answer as well. So might as well answer some Nucleus specific questions that came up. Oh, are you back? Show us the pain. Oh, everybody
Where
wants
customers and researchers and others can. Would I share? I don't know. That's a good question. I need to think about that a little bit. On a context. Oh, there we go.
You're back. You're back. You were frozen there for a few minutes. So we just heard that it was a great question, which I appreciate.
Oh wow, you missed the monologue. Yeah. So like I broadly we get so great question about the which panes of glass or sharing with customers, because I got the sharing with customers bit.
The sharing with customers bit.
Yeah, so like broadly we get independently audited, and like I I worry about the cottage industry that is sharing with customers their specific way of looking at security. So I want to be as transparent as possible in how we provide security through independent audits. And not have to answer questionnaires every day that are slightly different than others. So yeah, like I think some panes of glass, yes, you can share, and I think SBOMs are a really good way of doing that because they get then visibility of what's inside your product. But it's probably not something we've considered or have been asked for in the short term. I know federal government in the United States is now asking for those things.
Gotcha. No, that all makes sense. I was just curious your thoughts on that as a vendor yourself. And
yeah.
In the last 7 minutes here, I like to give the people what they want. We've got a lot of questions about Nucleus in particular. So I don't know if you're interested in answering a couple of those, if you don't mind. Looks like one being, what kind of benefits can a tool like Nucleus provide when you're already heavily invested in Azure and its vulnerability management suite of capabilities?
So I don't use the Azure suite, so I don't know its capabilities. We're a little bit in Azure, but we use other tools to go identify vulnerabilities in there. I think things like adding EPSS, Kev, and threat intelligence are probably key things. I don't know if Azure provides them, but things that for me a platform like Nucleus provides and are amazing and help me prioritize vulnerabilities.
Okay, great. Yeah, I would probably add to that with the little Nucleus context in here too, is that so Nucleus is designed to be a system that integrates and interacts with all of the tools in your whole stack. So you might be heavily invested in Azure, and there's a certain set of workflows and capabilities you've built off of that. But as soon as you have another team that uses another suite of tools or another type of tool, so that goes back to the complexity that Peter was talking about earlier, that you basically need to have a consistent place where you can configure and set up your policies all in one spot. So you can say, hey, well, we're invested in Azure, but we're also invested in AWS and Wiz and Tenable, and maybe we have OT, and all of that stuff, and all of those tools are all vulnerability identification systems. but you don't have a single place to manage all of the workflows and then kind of fan it out to all your different teams. So that would be kind of the types of benefits where you get, quote unquote, the single pane of glass. It's the reason it's called a single pane of glass is because it's all about taking data from different places and bringing it into one spot. And there are other ways to do that. It doesn't have to just be Nucleus specifically, but I mean, you could build your own data warehouse as well. Sounds like MYOB had one of those internally that they used before they partnered with us. So there's lots of different ways to do it, but obviously I'll die on the hill saying that we do it the best. So there was that question, and then there was another one from Don for you, Peter. That was, of the top vulnerabilities you've discovered, what's the worst case that you have uncovered? Or is there anything really, really crazy that you discovered through this process?
No, I think that, and that's probably the sad thing. Then mostly common things or things where somebody has stopped updating. Like, yeah, there's like that is the unfortunate, sad truth. Where like it's. I worry more about the things that are forgotten and left unpatched or unloved, rather than and we use pen testing partners, and yes, they find stuff, but they're not the ones that keep me up at night. It's the mundane that keeps me up at night, unfortunately.
That's the way that it goes. And let's see what we've got here. In the last 2 minutes, I just feel like we've gotten so many questions about Nucleus in particular, which I always try to avoid in these. But just for popular demand, you're welcome, everybody, or thank you, everybody. I don't know, one of the two. So hopefully, can we all see the screen here? Just in the last couple minutes. So this is the main operations dashboard of Nucleus. So you'd be able to go in, and basically the idea is this is your jumping off point as a Nucleus user. So there's like kind of an admin based view, and then there's this general user view. So this particular view is designed for vulnerability analysts when they first kind of want to get a sense of where we are today, what happened in the last 24 hours, and kind of those pinpoint what actions we might want to take today. Now you'll notice there's a whole bunch of different data sources that we've got plugged in here. You've got the ability to segment across different business units and projects. You've got lists of assets that are being built based on all the vulnerability data and scans and asset inventory tools you plug in. You got all the vulnerabilities based on what's been active, what's been resolved, all that sort of fun stuff. Somebody asked a question about being able to generate a data export. We do have things like that as well. So you can try to generate reports inside of Nucleus. You can push data out to a BI system, things like that. Automation, all that sort of fun stuff. And so some of the things that we've been talking about today and Peter has mentioned have revolved around, I imagine, a couple pages, which is probably the asset management page, which is where all of your assets and all of their associated vulnerabilities live, as well as all of the vulnerabilities and active vulnerabilities tied to, threat intelligence information and things like that, right? So I imagine this is what we've been circling around today. And with that, we've only got a couple minutes left, but I did want to just show it because hate to have you all come to one of these webinars, ask for it and not get it. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up to the last piece here, which is thank you so much, everybody, for coming. In the next webinar, we're going to specifically talk about ticketing and how you manage ticketing workflows within vulnerability remediation, because your patch management cycle isn't necessarily the same as your kind of product security and ticketing workflows. And so we're going to do a deep dive into different ways of structuring that. How do you work across an IT organization and product security in the same company, and those types of things, or even across the same team, right? Because those don't often line up. And with that, Peter, I'd like to give you the last word. Is there anything that you would like to finalize or say to the folks before we head out?
No, thanks for having me, and thanks for some of the great questions. Very thoughtful. I'm going to now go figure out which other panes of glass I need at work. Although my team might hate me by the end of the day. Hopefully you'll have a wonderful afternoon, and thanks for having me.
Thanks everybody for coming. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Peter.